What's up, Coding 2? Mr. Agnos here. In this video, we're going to use some if-else statements to make a card virtually flip. In other words, we're going to have one thing written on one side of the card, a joke, and then we'll have the punchline on the other. And essentially what we're doing here is making a button, right? Only when we press within this certain rectangle is the condition going to be met where we'll get to see the punchline of the joke. And so this is a really simple example of a button. And buttons are something you guys use all the time. They're all over every web page that you visit. So this is a really simple example of a button. Okay, so here's the code I have so far. You can see my joke here. Why do cows wear bells? We'll get to the punchline here in a second. Anytime you're going to have something change visually, you're going to need a draw function. So I have my draw function. I have a background. I chose a beautiful blue. This code right here is drawing the actual physical card itself. Notice I did round the corners, so I'm using the optional parameter here to round the corners because I think it looks nice. And then here's my text. Remember, text uses a fill command to change its color. So maybe I'll change the color, make it a nice purple. Text size changes the size of the font. And then the text command, you put it in parentheses what you want to say, and it should turn green. Now, notice that I have a couple extra numbers here. This is the X position and Y position of the text. And remember, that is the lower left-hand corner of the text. So that is this point right here. That is the point 117, I'm sorry, right here. Right there, the first sentence. That is the point 117, 166, right? It uses the lower left. So what are these other two numbers? Well, what those other two numbers do is these are drawing a text box so that my text will wrap around. Watch what happens if I get rid of those. So I'm going to delete these. And you can see now that my text goes off the page. So when you use these two optional parameters, the width and the height, they draw a text box. And you guys might be familiar with this from Microsoft Word, where it has you can insert a text box. So when you're making a text box for a card like this, just pay attention to the size of the rectangle, right? My rectangle is 300 wide by 200 tall. So I want my text to stay within, those numbers there, 300, 200. And so I played around with a couple different numbers, and I decided that my joke is pretty short, so 200, 100 worked pretty well. If I make this wider, watch what happens. Eventually, the word where will be able to fit, right, on the upper line there. And that obviously, and then again, I can move all the text to the left if I wanted to and get this to fit. But I kind of like how it looks like that. Okay, so that's what I have so far. So what we want to do is we want it so that whenever I click anywhere on the card, not in the blue, only on the card, we want the punchline of the joke to appear and the joke itself to disappear. So in order to do that, I'm going to need what's called an if-else statement. An if-else statement says, if these conditions are met, run this code, else run some different code. So I'll show you what that looks like. So here's my if statement. Right, it's going to give me an error message. All right. If whatever is inside these parentheses, that's too big. If whatever condition is inside these parentheses is met, run the code that is inside these brackets. Else, run this code. So the else statement right here, the second half of this, else run this code, that is sort of the default. That is what the computer is going to run first. And at first that might seem counterintuitive. You're like, wait a minute, this line 15 is written first and line 16 comes second. But remember, line 15 is only going to happen if this condition is being met. Otherwise, it's going to run this. So when you're setting up your if-else statement for a card like this, you actually want the question to be inside the else statement. Again, it's a little counterintuitive. So I'm going to I'm going to cut and paste all of this, Control X, and I'm going to put it inside my else statement, Control V. All right, and again, I'm getting some error messages here because I I have this if statement here with nothing in it. All right, so now it's going to run this code. This is the default code. This is what it's going to run unless this condition is met. All right, so the conditions that I want are going to turn the rectangle into a button. So we only want it to happen if the mouse is being pressed. So that command is mouse is pressed. Notice the I and the P are capitalized. But that's not the only condition I want, right? That's not the only condition I want. I want only if the mouse is pressed and it's within this rectangle. So for and, you actually have to use two and symbols. That is how you say and. Don't ask me why. All right, the left-hand side of my rectangle right here is at an x value of 50. So I want mouse x to be greater than 50. All right, and the right-hand side of my rectangle over here is, and I'm a little off there, I apologize. Well, let's see. I start at 50, and the rectangle is 300 units wide. So if I start counting from 50 and I count 300 units to the right, well, that's essentially 50 plus 300, which means this second line over here is at 350. So I want mouse x to be greater than 50, but I also want it to be less than 350. Okay, I forgot to type mouse x. All right, well, this is pretty good, but the button is still going to work if I click up top here or down bottom here. So I need to do the same thing with my y coordinates. So I'm going to type and mouse y. Well, I'll use a different color for y. Let's see. The y value of my rectangle is 100. So this line right here is 100. So we want to make sure that mouse y is greater than 100. So we're going that direction. So mouse y is going to be greater than 100. And this will be my last condition. Here's the bottom. And let's see, if this is 100 and the rectangle is 200 pixels tall, so 100 plus 200 would give me a value of 300 here. So this green line is being drawn at a y value of 300. So we want mouse y to be less than 300. So mouse y is less than 300. All right. So if you're going to make a mistake here, again, the numbers, you can always number scrub and get those right. But a lot of times, just with the little symbols, the greater than or less than, people put the wrong one, or they get it backwards, and then the button won't work correctly. So really double check that you have your greater than or less than symbols correct. Okay, so if the mouse is pressed, and it's greater than 50 but less than 350, and its mouse y is greater than 100 but less than 300, then it's going to run the code in the brackets here. All right, so now it's time for the punchline. I guess I have to reveal the punchline. So I'll type in a new fill. If I don't type in a new fill here, it's going to use the fill from this rectangle right here. So I want to type in a new fill, and I'm going to get rid of all of that stuff. I'll use the same, well, whatever, I'll change the color. I'll make it like maybe a bright green. So it's going to fill with that, and then this text size command right here, this text size command is going to loop around and apply to this one. Remember, a draw function is a loop. So this text size command will loop around and make sure that this text is the same size. So one way to deal with that might be kind of confusing, is I can control exit here and maybe just put it at the top of the program. So what that's going to do is now you kind of know, hey, every text that appears in this program is going to be of size 30. If you want to change it, you'll have to put an individual text command in front of your text. All right, I'm going to say text, and I guess I have to reveal the punchline at right now. Why do cows wear bells? Because their horns don't work. Hilarious. All right, where do I want to put this? Well, I'm just going to use the same coordinates here. I'll number scrub if that doesn't look right. 117, 166, and I'm going to use the same size box. I'll just do 224, 100. Okay, let's see if this worked. So right now it is running the else code, right? This condition is not being met. So it's running the default code, which is right here. As soon as I press the mouse and my mouse is within these parameters, it should run this code if I've done everything correctly. So I'm going to start by testing around. So I'm clicking in the blue, nothing is happening. So that's a good sign. There it is. So now I test all the way around. You can even test like right on the edges, right? So here it's not working, here it is working. So my writing is not perfectly centered. I need to move it up a little bit. So I may just number scrub a little bit there. That's better. Okay, why do cows wear bells? Because their horns don't work. Now, this will only work if I'm holding the mouse down. There is another way to make it where I click one time and the card would flip. We'll get to that. For right now, this condition will only be met if I'm holding the mouse down. So why do cows wear bells? Because their horns don't work, and I am holding the mouse down right now. And then as soon as I release it, it goes back to the default. Okay, so that was a really simple example of a button. We will get into more sophisticated buttons, how to make different shape buttons. Maybe I want a circular button, which I think is actually a bit easier than this. And I even had students in the past make a triangular button, which is more complicated than this. But generally, circles and rectangles are great. So hopefully you find this video helpful. I'll explain your project in class, but let me know in the comments or send me an email if you have questions.